And now let's move north into the 2nd District and Congressman Rick Larsen. Just as Boeing has stopped beating up its suppliers and getting in line and working in conjunction with labor and getting back to an engineering and safety focus, wow, here comes an international trade war and China really taking a step back from products that are crucial to Congressional District 2 in Washington State. Talk a little bit about what you're hearing, what's going on, and what do you think some of the long-term impacts of this have the possibility of being?
Well, I'm fortunate enough to be the congressman who represents more Boeing employees and retirees than any other member of Congress in the United States. And they do great work. They build great airplanes. They've been through a really tough time. The company's been through a tough time as well. And the main focus for Boeing largely right now is on this thing called the Safety and Quality Plan. That is basically the work that they need to do to increase their production rates again, to hire more people and so on. So this ongoing trade war that the president has brought upon the United States isn't helping. The U.S.-China trade relationship was already in pretty tough shape. China the government in China clearly believes it's strong enough to withstand a trade war with the United States, and is being very targeted in attacking and creating collateral damage on major U.S. products, including Boeing airplanes. And so, the folks at Boeing, their long-term plan is really about rebuilding trust, building quality, safe airplanes, taking that route, and calculating where the China market sits in this right now. It hasn't been a great market for Boeing or Airbus, frankly, for quite some time. China hasn't. So this is collateral damage that may have a big impact short term, and it may have a bigger impact long term or not. It's really kind of up in the air. But it does show that China feels it's strong enough to push back against the United States and its largest exporter by revenue, and that's Boeing. Those are Boeing airplanes and the women and men who make them.
I understand the principle of trying to bring manufacturing back to the United States. I worked for years out in the Midwest. I've been to many towns with the empty factory and no more textiles, no more auto parts, no more you name it, furniture. And, we made a deal with the devil back in the 70s and 80s to get cheap stuff in exchange for selling out American labor. So I understand the principle of it. Is this being carried out strategically, do you think, or do you think it's a mess and we're going to see what happens?
I think the president's trade war is a mess. It's creating chaos. There's really no strategy to it. When he first announced the increase on tariffs using these national emergency powers, it was so chaotic. We were putting tariffs on an uninhabited island, a couple of islands inhabited only by penguins. That's just an example of sort of the spaghetti on the wall approach that the president has taken. The flip side of this is that manufacturing jobs, the number of manufacturing jobs in the U.S. has increased over time. We have increased manufacturing jobs. We are investing in our transportation system with the passage of the bipartisan infrastructure law. There's a reason why the unemployment rate has been hovering as low as 4 or 3.9% over the last couple of years, because women and men are going to work every day in construction, building the next generation infrastructure. There are things we're doing with the CHIPS and Science Act that are investing in the United States. I would argue this president could have left things alone, and it wouldn't be chaotic. Things would be going pretty well, and people wouldn't be panicking about their 401ks or about the price of gas or the price of eggs. But that's where we are right now.
Yeah, and the emphasis there being, let's face it, we're never going to make ping pong balls or tennis shoes in this country again, but high value things do have a continuing role. And I think the president's idea there is, listen, I'm going to give manufacturers a high price as opposed to government money. Two major differences in philosophy there. I get that, but you mentioned the word chaos, and that's a good segue into another question I have for you. What are constituents telling you about chaos? Here at KBTC and public television, we're having difficulty planning, not knowing what's going to happen with the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. And the same thing is happening with personal finance and families, small business, imports, exports. What does that policy chaos mean on the ground in a for the non-Boeings in District 2.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big fan of public television. I watch my Masterpiece Mysteries. I think the investment it's a very tiny investment the government makes in the Corporation for Public Broadcasting to support public television. It's also a very tiny investment the federal government makes in our local libraries, and yet now libraries are being hit because of a cut to a program that is the way it's going to play out is exacerbating the rural digital divide. Rural libraries use this federal money in order to bring free Wi-Fi to rural areas for their customers, for their taxpayers, for kids, for students. Without that money, Wi-Fi in rural areas is going to be degraded, and it means less access to educational materials for local kids. People are concerned about Medicaid cuts. Medicaid cuts are coming because of the chaos in the budget. In Whatcom County, as for instance, in 2023, 50% of the kids born in Whatcom County in 2023 were born into families that use Medicaid as a primary health care. In Skagit County, it's 60%. So what I want to tell people is, like, Medicaid is not healthcare for the poor. You don't have to play more than 2 degrees of Kevin Bacon to find someone who uses Medicaid as their primary health care, or a friend of a friend. It's going to hit people in your neighborhood when these cuts happen. And finally, I'll just note that this president came in, he said he's going to cut gas prices on day one. In Everett, where I live, the gas prices are up 65 cents since Inauguration Day. Now, is that the president's fault? I don't know if it is the president's fault or not. He promised they'd come down, and he's breaking the promise. All this focus on the chaos it means the president is not focused on doing the very thing he got elected to do, and that was address costs and inflation for average Americans. He's not doing it.
A lot of state costs in the state of Washington going into the price of gas. The cost of oil is going down, and answers for things like putting trade barriers on small islands is to avoid transshipment problems. I mean, there's I hear you, Rick, and
but to argue that this is some sort of grander strategy, no one sees it.
Yeah,
no one sees it. In fact, the president and his team themselves have constantly said, "Hey, you're going to have to live with a little pain. We might have a recession." I've served with 4 presidents, and I can think back all the way back to Clinton, to Bush 1.0, to Reagan, even to Carter, and no president that I can recall ever said, "I want you all to be ready for a recession. I want you all to be ready for economic pain."
No president or Congress has also stepped in to deal with what is now a $36 trillion national debt. Is this the first volley in that to some degree? And is the Democratic Party in some ways letting the Republicans at least make the initial foray into handing out that pain?
Well, first off, it may be a point that's a distinction without a difference, but it's not true what you just said. The Clinton administration specifically moved on trying to decrease the debt by passing budgets with surpluses. That did happen.
There were some years in there, yeah.
Yeah. So the numbers are clear about that. But also when I got in 2000 and Bush 43 came in, they used these projections on budget surpluses to put forward a tax cut that blew the deficits open again. Democrats haven't been much better, but it doesn't mean we need to make things worse. And the budget proposal right now that Congress is looking at working towards, that the Republicans put forward, would add anywhere from $1.5 trillion to $3 trillion to the national debt. Meanwhile, at the same time, doing a tax cut up to about $4.5, maybe $5 trillion. And based on what they did in 2017, this tax cut will also provide tax cuts largely to the richest Americans and largest corporations. That's not hyperbole. That's what happened in 2017 with the last time they did a tax cut. And there's no indication that's going to change. So it doesn't help dealing with the national debt. What's going on? We do need at the federal level a much more progressive tax code than we have now, and more progressive than the one we're going to get, in order to provide some stability in this. Without getting into, we could do international economics all day, but this debt to GDP ratio that is a really much better indicator than the absolute number associated with the debt.
The resist movement keeps calling on congressional Democrats to do something. And my first question is, what the heck can you really do? Second of all, again, I can kind of argue it both ways that, is there some value in trying to cross the aisle to at least to somewhat shape policies you generally disagree with? Or is the answer, no, elections have consequences and MAGA can just kind of reap the whirlwind here?
Well, elections have consequences, which is true, does not mean MAGA gets to reap the whirlwind. There's a lot of pain the Republican majority is feeling right now because they're finding out what it means to try to pass a MAGA budget, if you for short term, or to give you a shorthand description of it, including these cuts to Medicaid. $880 billion over the next 10 years is the potential cut to the Medicaid program, which is likely going to mean a lot of hurt for a lot of folks. But we need to focus on pushing back against the Trump administration as Democrats, and we're doing that.
Rick Larsen, thanks so much for coming to Northwest Now. A lot of big topics out there.
A lot going on. Thanks, Tom.